Hey everybody, welcome to DBS Films Podcast. My name is Kel. With me as always, my brother Brennan. Together we have movies with DBS Films. Today's episode, we are talking about scene by scene breakdown of Horror in the Forest. This is now part 5 of us breaking down the individual scenes of this movie, letting you guys know what we think about it. And it is something that we always recommend for indie filmmakers as a huge process when it comes to improving your movies, understanding what works, what doesn't work, what scenes you want to add in there, all of those fun things. Now, you can go ahead and take a look at Horror in the Forest online. If you rent and review it, it means the world to us. And with that being said, you can also join our Discord channel and you can be part of our process because we make movies for our fans with our fans. So at this point in time, Nelson is right about to start his ritual. We got the tiki torches on fire, which we did learn a lesson about that. Probably just get metal poles next time instead of actual wood tiki torches because they kept falling over. But before we hop into this scene, I kind of wanted to, just get a recap where we're at. Right now, we're an hour into this movie. And I think my favorite part about this movie is it moves really quickly. Especially compared to our other movies, I think the pacing here is our best pacing done yet. And I think that's usually what we see when we improve our movies is better pacing. We've kind of mentioned the one thing is we do wish we had Nelson a little bit earlier. We only get him in the 30-minute mark, and we think it can kind of be shifted more towards the story of that. But I think all in all, you disregard Nelson showing up a little bit earlier. This thing moves. You've already gotten a full story, full grief characters, a lot of pop scares. I'm loving getting the reviews that we're getting so far because a lot of people, especially shout out to that found footage horror group online, because they've been highlighting scares that have been hitting for them, and a lot of these scares were pre-ritual mark. So, what are your feelings? Getting to this hour mark now with this movie?
Yeah, I mean, we finally got it to the climax, which is good, or at least the building of the climax. But yeah, it's cool to go back and see the reviews that are actually informative as opposed to ones just saying this is a Blair Witch copy. Because a lot of the reviews just highlighted, a lot of the stuff was just basically appears, and it's true. We had a fire pit that we used, and the tiki torches. Who's carrying the tiki torches? In the head, or my head is Dylan. Dylan's got all the camp gear and everything, but it's definitely something. The details, obviously, are what make a good movie, and obviously, next time we're gonna, make it better. But I mean, it was just we wanted to circle the whole thing with tiki torches because it looks cool, and and we wanted a ritual scene. So it's definitely a learning lesson, but I think the impact, as an indie filmmaker, we have to make concessions. We got to kind of pick and choose our battles. And the battle that we chose was to have a really cool fire scene, a really cool ritual scene, and just kind of, forego the details on this one. But it's really wild because it really never crossed my mind how they got the tiki torches. I think we just got them and we knew they looked really cool. So we just kept setting up more and more. But I did know that we did have the fire pit, but I guess I zoomed in on the fire pit in some of the edits so you could tell it's a fire pit because otherwise it would just be a fire. So I guess that was just on me. But it's weird that no one ever brought that up in any of our feedback stuff before. So like another reason why you upload movies is because the different segments of people that you're showing this movie to have different feedback. And this is something that we're going to focus. We'll never make this mistake again. We'll make sure we'll have scenes where they're packing stuff up. And, surprise, surprise, in the Bigfoot movie, there's a scene where we got a cut of them packing up their gear so that they can leave, so that it makes sense that they have all their stuff. So once again, we subconsciously kind of, figure out what we need to do. We learn from it and we make a better movie. But as far as the pacing goes, where we're at in the movie, I think it is textbook story structure, and it's like right where it needs to be to get this thing off.
So I will say, when we were on set and you were filming a fire pit, I was like, that looks like a pretty legit fire pit, man. But you know what I immediately did? Hey, it's found footage, baby. It's indie filmmaking. You got to move on. You got to move forward with those ones. And so far, I think I only saw one person that picked that up. And that person was like, to be fair, I'm incredibly analytical and I like looking at details. But I think the fire pit scene's awesome. I love fire. Fire's sick. I think we've always wanted to have torches in a circle. Like basically every single script that we kind of have is like, it'd be sick, like a big fire there. And we will always see fire. I love fire. So, this is me fawning over that. I do want to kind of continue to hop into more detail here. This is a tough scene, man. You know, you got a lot of stuff going on there. There's a lot of emotions. At any point in time, one of my tiki torches will burn off, and it was just a giant fireball that falls in the background. The lighting changes because of that. So then it's like you're kind of hopping around one to the other. So there's a lot of really hard dynamics just in getting this. And guess what? This is the climax. This is the important part. So you have all these situations. I'm kind of running around every once in a while, just causing these rags of kerosene clothing to go up in flames. So it was pretty intense to get this one done. Before we kind of hop into some more of the details, what was that like as a cinematographer, just having, again, I feel like anytime you don't have controllable elements, whether it is a special effects prop, whether it is, again, fire, whether it is things that give you a time limit, you're limited by extra factors that can't just be, okay, cut and reset. So what was kind of your process for getting everything? Because again, this is a huge part of the movie and there was a lot to film. And again, you could run out of torches. That's a very easy possibility.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only hard part with this one was the torches and the rags. We were using the tiki torches, which in hindsight was really kind of dumb because we should just had a metal pole and just wrap the cotton around it with like a metal fencing wire or something, and it would have been fine. Because the tiki torches would give us maybe a minute or two, and it was just rushing the actors and it was just rushing myself. The good news is if you watch the movie, there's not a lot of fire stuff that's in there that has dialogue over. A lot of his montage stuff, so I was able to kind of pull and move it around. But it was difficult. The one thing with fire that if you're going to use as an indie filmmaker, they have to be aware of is that the brightness changes a lot. And it's fine for me because I know I color correct. So I understand like where, if it gets too dark or if it's too bright, where we need to be. But it's always a little bit of an issue. I remember the Roger fire pit scene was very difficult to do. Some of the stuff that we're doing now in Cold Grave, it's a little bit more tedious to kind of match it, where we've gotten so good at filming our stuff in camera that I could literally just throw a LUT on there and we get our footage color graded. I think the Roger project is a new world record. I think color correction took me maybe an hour. So it's like going back from the stuff that we did before with Morgan Estate and Devil in the Room, where it used to take me 3-4 weeks to color correct, and then you get through the color correction and you'd be like, this kind of sucks, and you go back to the original ones, and it's kind of back and forth, where we've got everything down to a science now where we can just kind of apply this stuff, get it done. But the fire going bright and then dimming, it does cause some extra work. But I think the juice is worth the squeeze again. As indie filmmaker, you have to choose your battles, and I'm gonna, choose my battle to play with fire, 10 times out of 10 because it just looks great.
Love me that fire. So let's hop into this ritual scene. I think one, you start off with that montage. Again, I think it looks cool. I love it. I love like every second of the scene. I really do. I think it's visually appealing. Then you start off with, we've talked about it before. This was really supposed to be kind of like a minor way to kick off the scene, the knife scene, handing the knife off and then slicing it for the blood kind of gives every single character's motivation. So, look at that. I'm sure there's some writer thing in there where it's like each character is basically showing either they're hesitant and reluctant like Bo, determined like Alexa, or just scared shitless like Steven. It's really kind of a mix of those ones. But huge shout out to Dylan. He did a great job with the poem of the blood to really kind of highlight the blood spilling out, because that sells it, in my opinion. If you didn't get a good blood pour, it might have just kind of looked a little cheesy, because again, that knife is like the dinkiest little thing out there. But I think the good pour of it really sets things off, and then you're ready to go. And again, that's a long dialogue sequence with the fires going on. You're kind of moving around. You had to do like a little fake handoff of the camera. But that was something that kind of came together, real quick on the fly to make it be one of the more impactful scenes in the movie.
Yeah, I mean, the Blood Brothers scene is what we were calling it. Was an interesting one because it really was just a scene where I was like, all right, Nelson has to do something weird that's kind of threatening. And it was just a really quick insert scene. I think I think I might have wrote it down and added it to the movie maybe like a couple days before we even shot this. And it's just something, that you're on set and you're looking for organic stuff, natural stuff to occur. And they were rehearsing it. And I'm always trying to get oneers. I love oneers. And I started moving the camera around. I'm like, hey, this is an opportunity to get a really cool shot here. And so we kind of expanded on it and moved it around. And then I knew I had something. And I was extremely frustrated because it was very difficult for me to block it, because that whole shot is a oneer. And I had to move around and, focus on the characters, very choreographed scene. And I always remember, when I can't figure out something, I ask for help on set. And I think I asked Kel, and I asked Dylan, and Dylan essentially choreographed it correctly. Like the way you see it in the movie is how Dylan choreographed it. But, true to my nature, I wasn't really paying attention to him. I was like, no, let me try this. Let me try this. He's like, no, this is how you have to do it. You have to do it. And then Alexa comes up and she's like, hey, do it this way, which is the same way Dylan said. And I did it. And I'm like, oh, damn, Alexa, you figured that out. And you get, you got a wrinkle on your brain. You figured this out. And Dylan got so pissed because it really was his way to do it. But I mean, that scene is great. It really is a really cool scene. And it's just an example of basically adding something in last minute. And when you get the right actors in there, when you get the right lighting, when you get the right cinematography, you can get some really cool scenes in there. And I think like maybe we get 2 or 3 of these each movie where I'm just like, damn, this is this has production value. It has cinematic stuff. It looks really good. And, we just got lucky with this one, but I think it turned out well. I'm happy it was in there, because if you just went from montage to, I don't even know what was next. It's just like him yelling at the bucket, or it's they want to try and leave. So I think you're just missing a good piece out there. So I'm really happy that we got it. It looked great, and I think it's one of the better scenes in the whole movie.
It definitely looked that good, and that sounds like classic Brendan filmmaking to me. Poor Dylan. I will say at least Alexa got some credit, because typically what will happen is when I'm like, hey, here's how you do it, and you're like, no, that's just dumb. Then you'll do it for 2 more times, and then you'll actually do it the correct way, and you won't mention a thing, and it'll just be like, damn, Brendan, way to figure it out. So huge props again. Every once in a while, it's a team effort to kind of get that choreography to set, and it definitely hits well. So next scenes, as you mentioned, Nelson's basically waiting. They're waiting. Bo's a little bit bored with this, and they basically say, hey, it's time to go. And, this I think is again the tension between Bo and Nelson. This scene's really, really well done to me. I think Bo came off as a real defender. What a white knight here, in the sense of when he gets frustrated at Georgie and they kind of have a little altercation of a shove. He hops in there ready to go. And then they basically scuffle to the ground. Now, this in itself, I mean, again, with found footage, this is when it gets really tricky, of like figuring out where your cuts are, what's going to happen, how you go from one way to the other. You can usually pull from it, but we basically get a little bit of action in this one. And then the wind kind of, blows. We did try to do a different take with us having the wind turn off the lights, just so it's like kind of noticeable. Like, again, I think the big thing for me is like, I think this missed like, on a very basic level, I probably would have had like some type of machine or something to kind of like signify the witches nearby, like an EMF reader or something like that. On a grander scale, if I had like cooler things, I would have had like something moving around, or like, just some type of way to really instill that the witch was showing up. But I still think, again, hey, something's happening. The witch is here. Probably to me, it would be like the torches just immediately go out. I think that's what we were trying to get happen, but never really happened. But they wrestle to the ground and then they have it. I think this is a good scene, but I would say from here, like the rest of my feedback for this movie is it's kind of, I mean, actually, there's the Nelson scene that's coming up, which is really good. But I think after that, then we kind of have a pretty good stuff. Good but not great is kind of the way that I will summarize it. Again, I think we do a really, really good job in the lead up to this part, but I think we just needed to focus in a little bit more on kind of kicking off the climax here, having a little extra oomph. And I think this is really what we learned. I mean, Cold Grave really pushes it during this time frame, and Bigfoot takes it to a whole nother level. So I would say, with the Nelson fight and the Bo fight kind of kicking things off, what are your whole thoughts there? Because, like I was saying, I think this is where, if there was anything to invest and spice up, I think it's this point onward. Caveat the Nelson gunshot scene.
Yeah, I mean, I think this suffers from a couple things. I think it suffers from, with found footage, you really got to know what you're doing. And when you have a scene where anyone gets shoved, or you have to have a pretty big cut in there and you have to hide the cut, you have to be very good at hiding the cut. And we just weren't experienced with found footage. It was my first found footage movie doing it. So it's hard to hide some of these cuts. So, you see the camera glitch with Nelson. You can see the inserted frame with the fire thing that extended a little bit more. And I'm really kind of disappointed in the exchange with Nelson and Georgie, where the whole thing was he brought them out there to be exchanged for the girl, and it's there in the movie. But if you're really not paying attention to it, it's not that, like, it's not noticeable. And to me, that was such a cool little scene, especially in the script. The way it read was like, even though, or Nelson's showing that the witch exists, but he's also showing that he did this on purpose to bring them out there. And it just was kind of glossed over. And I think we could have expanded on this scene. I think you could have had like a rising action. I think you could have had more panic that the witch is here, but just the way it was shot, the difficulty of the situation, this is how we kind of played it out. But I think, if we do this movie again, that's such a spicy scene and we just kind of gloss over it. It sucks. Like, it bothers me that we didn't give it its due. But once again, it's like, this is the thing with uploading and, making movies, is next time we'll really hammer this one home. But I think where the movie is now, and we'll get into the gun scene next, I think it's fine. I do think that, we'll get to the part, when it gets to the part, we'll talk about it. But I do think that the Nelson fight scene was sloppy. I know we had difficulties with them wrestling. We tried to do it again. We still didn't really get it. That torch was going on and off. We didn't have a way to blow it out. So it's like, yeah, I'm giving my feedback on myself, and I'd like to make it better and more smooth. But we had a lot of things going against us on this shot. I think that the one thing that I would do is just, on a script level, make sure it's very clear that he had brought them out there, give that scene more oomph, so that when the lights do go out, it's just more impactful. When Nelson says, I brought you the girl, as in Alexa, as in Georgie character, it's very clear that he's a little more insidious character than, he let on. And I think he kind of lends himself as more of a mastermind at that point. Like, Nelson is a smart character, even though he's kind of like a babbling drunk and just this weird guy. I think we lost a lot of character depth because it should have been like him tricking them, and this is his plan all along, and it just never comes across. So I think in, Horror in the Forest 2, Into the Forest 3, we'll really highlight that and make sure that's, a front focal point of, this movie.
Definitely agree. And I will say we will have 2 more episodes the following week about what we would do for Horror in the Forest 2 or Into the Forest 3. But I think personally, having more of the witch, I think we just needed to have a good looking special effect up, crazy looking witch, and make kind of the negotiation between Nelson and the witch more obvious, where like the witches, looks over towards Georgie, they're kind of signaling or something. And again, that's my mindset of what I think would have added more oomph to it. But, we hit our witch a little bit more in this one for obvious reasons. Just, you want to have like a cool looking one if you're going to go witch mode. That's always the double edge of like kind of monsters and things like that. But for the last scene for this episode, really the catalyst of, what I think Horror in the Forest is actually, where we're at, we're going to hold you guys on a little bit of a cliffhanger. I'm looking at the time now. We're going to go ahead. We're going to pick up with the big scene in the next episode. Be sure to take a look, Horror in the Forest online. rent and review means the world to us, as it allows us to make movies for our fans with our fans. And join our Discord channel online, because if you do, you can have the opportunity to be in one of our movies. But until then, have a good one, my friends.